introduce Nick Allen, who is the manager of Mastering Mountains Charitable Trust. This is an organisation that supports people with neurological conditions to access the outdoors. Nick lives with functional neurological disorder and fibromyalgia, and today Nick will be sharing his own health journey and the hope that he finds through spending time outdoors. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Sweet. Well, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Nick toka ingoa. Welcome everybody. And my name's Nick. I'm a writer and a climber. And as Laura mentioned, I'm the manager at Mastering Mountains Charitable Trust. And just a huge thank you to MS Parkinson's for having me to talk. It's just a real privilege, and I'm excited to share my health journey with you today. So during the session, I'm going to tell you about my story through a series of photographs. I'll skip through the years as a sort of timeline, but and hopefully share with you some of the significant moments that have led me to this point here now. So this is an overview of today. The first two pictures here on the left and the middle, I have pinned against above my desk on the wall. And the one on the left, it is the moment that I fell in love with the mountains. In the middle, this is me climbing Island Peak in Nepal, which was achieving a lifelong dream of mine. And then on the right here was just from a few months ago, a moment of quite profound discouragement as I had to come off a climb and figure out how to navigate functional neurological disorder and fibromyalgia. So I want to tell you about moments in between these photos, and as we go through, I hope that my journey will help you see the power of hope and how hope has sustained me. And by the end, what I'm hoping is that you'll understand the strength of having a clear purpose, a why, of leaning on community, a we, strengthening your will or sense of agency, and mapping out your way. So my story starts with this moment on my 7th birthday at the Pinnacles in the Coromandel. So I grew up in Auckland. My dad had taken me on my tramp. This is my second tramp. And back in the day, the Pinnacles was a bit of a gnarly climb. Now it's got nice ladders and that kind of stuff. It's a lot safer. There's a platform right here to save you from the precarious drop on the side. But I remember climbing up these, there was chains and all kinds of things to get up to this point. And the sense of adventure, the thrill of it was just amazing. And then you get to the top and it felt like I could see for miles. And it just blew me away at that moment, and I realized that I wanted to be a climber. That was my goal in life, and as a young person, I was obsessed with mountains and mountaineering. We lived in Papakura, and Papakura had a small library, or has a small, well, it's a much larger library now, but back then there was a small mountaineering section, and I went through, with the exception of a couple of guidebooks, which were very dry reading, I read pretty much all of the books in the mountaineering section, and I had a picture of Mount Everest pinned to the wall above my bed, or ceiling. So I was just obsessed with mountains and mountaineering. So I had a goal, and that goal would become an anchor for my hope. So as a teenager, this is me when I'm 17, climbing at T Point, just north of Auckland. As a teenager, I threw myself into climbing and tramping. I was very fit. I, at this point, was cycling about 400 to 500 kilometers a week, and I was climbing and tramping, and I was fueled by my dreams of Himalayan ascents and gnarly peaks. So I had a goal that I was working towards to climb in the Himalayas. I knew the pathways. I was engaging in instruction and that kind of thing to get the training I needed. I had a small community of friends, and I had a sense of purpose, even if it was a slightly immature and vainglorious one. I had a sense of purpose, and that was driving me along. However, shortly after this photo, when I was about 18 or 19, I started to develop some weird symptoms. I began losing control of my bladder. And as an 18-year-old, there was just no way that I was telling mum or dad about that. And I just thought, oh, maybe it's just something, like a phase I go through and I'll just, get better. But it didn't. And I began losing strength in my legs. I noticed it particularly when I was cycling, and began at times having a tremor in my hand. And I thought, maybe I'll just grow through these weird things. And I thought that maybe I just wasn't training hard enough with the weakness in my legs. And so I pushed myself harder and harder to try and resolve these issues. But then one day, my body completely hit the wall. I was 21, and I cycled to work. I was feeling a bit off. And then that evening, after I went home early, I called my parents. I was like, oh, can you come pick me up? Because I just feel out of it. I went to bed and woke up the next day, and I was barely able to walk the flight of stairs in my parents' house. I struggled to shower myself in the morning, and I just had incredible fatigue all the time. And I definitely couldn't climb or cycle. And, I went to see the doctor, and they're like, oh, yeah, it's probably just a virus. And then days turned into weeks, and it's like, oh, yeah, well, maybe it's post-viral fatigue. And weeks turned into months, and it just wasn't getting better. In fact, it was getting worse. And as I'm sure some of you have experienced, you get that dreaded, sort of skeptical look from medical professionals. Well, maybe it's in your head. Which is so invalidating. And it felt like my dreams and hopes of climbing, they were beginning to unravel. It felt like my dreams were falling to pieces. This is skipping ahead a few years now to when I was 24, and I was studying in the States on a scholarship. So this is me at the university I was studying here, and I'm smiling in this photo because a family friend was in the States and popped in to say hi. I was taking a photo to send to mum. I wanted to portray this look of, everything's great and I'm all happy. But actually, although I'm smiling in this photo, I'm actually really not happy. In fact, this is the only photo that I know of. I deleted all others. The only photo that I know of me in the mobility scooter. I think for someone whose whole world and identity is centered around athleticism, outdoors, climbing, being stuck in the mobility scooter was just so difficult. And I felt ashamed to be so reliant on it. At this point, I couldn't walk outside the house without it. I couldn't handle any uneven ground. I couldn't really balance anymore, and I was in chronic pain. But one of the, as a young man, one of the most difficult things for me also about being in a mobility scooter was asking girls out. That was just, was incredibly hard. But, and so at this point, I felt hopeless. And in fact, stepping into the mobility scooter for the first time, I had this enormous resistance to using it because it felt like to step into the mobility scooter would be to forfeit my dreams and my hopes. And because my community had been largely outdoors based, I was losing my community. I didn't have a clear pathway out of my situation at that point because I still hadn't received a diagnosis. and I didn't have a strong sense of purpose or any sense of purpose at that point beyond just making it through today. And so in 2011, I dropped out of university. I wasn't able, in the States, I wasn't able to sustain it, and I moved back with my parents. And we went to see a neurologist in Hamilton, and he was sitting across the room from me, telling me that I had primary progressive MS. In many ways, we had been hoping for this diagnosis for quite some time. We had suspicions that it would be MS, and I thought that receiving the diagnosis was going to come as a relief. But actually, I was taken aback by the sense of devastation, even though I now finally had a diagnosis. The permanence of that diagnosis, to me it felt like a death sentence, and that my life was over, and that hopelessness only increased. And then, as so many of us do, I went into denial. I sort of denied that the whole thing was happening. I kept pushing myself. I went into this cycle of, like, oh, today I'm feeling good, go hard, and then tomorrow just, flat on my face in bed for a week, and then feel a bit better, go hard again. So that's boom bust cycle, and it was just punishing. And all of my attempts to try and get back outdoors and be active, they just resulted in pain and being bedridden, and so it felt like my dreams only led to disappointment. But because I was in denial, I felt like I had no agency in this whole situation in terms of my well-being and being able to be in control of it. Because of my denial, I could not see any pathways ahead. And I couldn't derive any meaning from my experience. And because I was in denial, I kept my diagnosis hidden from everyone but my closest friends and family. And so I wasn't able to get the help or support I needed. Little did I know that this would be me nearly 5.5 years later. And sitting there at the neurologist, in retrospect, I just wish someone had told me, the neurologist or someone else, told me that there can be hope, that you have every reason to hope, and that you can still live a fulfilling life no matter the diagnosis. And so obviously a lot changed from being the mobility scooter to this point, and rather than sort of just rattle off a list of like, well, I did this and this and this, I would like to examine some of these changes through a lens of hope and hope theory. So I'll be drawing on the work of a guy called Rick Snyder, who's like the guru on hope theory, and this other person, Rachel Collin. So what is hope? And I suppose I'd love to hear from you all. What does hope mean to you as a concept?
Means perhaps my shuffle might go away and I might walk normally again.
Yes, it's a hope for a better outcome, a better future. Yeah.
An expectation that things will improve in the future.
Totally. So there's a change and a picture of a future that you're hoping for. Yes, absolutely.
That I'll continue to stay off a walking frame after being on one for many years.
Yeah.
I've fought my way off.
Yeah, good on you.
Keep walking.
Yeah, totally. So yes, a better future again. Yeah.
You will achieve your goals.
Yes. Yeah, and goals are so important. Absolutely. And we'll be looking at goals and how they function in the context of hope. Absolutely. Cool. Well, I think often hope can be. Sometimes we'll say like, I hope the weather's better tomorrow. Like I've got no control over the weather tomorrow, and so it's kind of a bit of a magical wish, like fingers crossed, hopefully. And but hope in this context is much more concrete than that. According to, from the lens of hope theory, hope is a learned set of cognitive tools. So it's possible to learn hope and to move from hopelessness to a sense of hopefulness. And within hope, goals are the anchor. They are, everything within hope sort of centers on goals, good, solid goals. They hold everything together. And according to hope theory and these psychologist researchers, hope has 4 components. There's I admire what they were doing with all of the W's, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know, it's something a bit corny. But anyway, way power, we power, willpower, and why power. And so when you have those 4 things together, those 4 pillars, you have hope. So way power is the ability to identify multiple flexible routes to achieve a goal and to navigate the difficulties along the way. Willpower or agency is the motivation and the belief that you've got the capacity to pursue at least one of those pathways. We power is that's community, and that's the social resources that sustain us. And what's really interesting about the community is that it helps us community can help us locate new pathways and increase our capacity or our agency. So why power is the meaning that makes a goal valuable, that motivates you to pursue it. And generally, why power needs to be beyond self-interest. It needs to be for some bigger purpose. So these 4 pillars all work together, and at the moment it's a little bit abstract, but what we're going to do is examine each of these through my own journey, and hopefully they'll just make a bit more sense. So I had received my diagnosis in 2011, and this is a couple of years later. And after some convincing, I had sort of got out of my state of denial, and I got connected with an exercise physiologist at Massey University in Arsenal, where I was studying. And I knew, so the exercise physiologist sent me a whole bunch of exercises. Now, I find the gym pretty hard work. I really dislike squats and lunges and all of these kinds of things. And initially, my rehab regimen was a little bit like, I wasn't feeling very motivated. So I knew that I needed a goal to make all of this work. And all I wanted was to get outdoors. That is my passion, and I wanted to go on a short overnight hike. That was my goal. And I got in contact with the local MS Society in Central Districts, and had been exposed to OMS lifestyle, and I'd taken that on board, and so took a 3-pronged approach of managing stress and making sure I had enough sleep, changing the way I ate, and careful guided exercise. And we got to work. But I needed to start from scratch. I had to relearn how to balance. I had to rebuild my stamina and fitness. And so I spent hours and hours at the gym. But I also had to learn how to listen to my body again, how to ask for help. I'm still learning how to ask for help, to be honest. How many is that? And I needed to learn the language to communicate my symptoms and how I was feeling, which was also surprisingly difficult for me. But I had to learn to find a way to negotiate the limitations of my diagnosis and my symptoms, and to find pathways around the challenges that I faced. But with the guidance of my exercise physiologist, we made progress. And I could balance longer, I could exercise slightly harder, and there were ups and downs, there were heaps of ups and downs, but I figured out how to make things work. I was finding a pathway. And I began to learn how to adapt, to identify, you would come up against a challenge, and like, okay, how can we adapt what I'm doing to find a way around that challenge? And this picture here is of my first overnight tramp, the tramp that was my goal for 18 months or 2 years or so at the gym with my exercise physiologist. Now, so this tramp is an illustration of this approach of adapting, of finding a new way, a new path forward. So by this point, I had done a bunch of short walks, most of them like maybe about 30 minutes and that kind of stuff. And I knew I could manage that. But after 30 minutes, I'd be pretty tired. But you know, I don't know, for me, walking 30 minutes in my tent and then plunking down, it doesn't quite feel like a tramp. It doesn't quite feel like I'm outdoors where you can hear the cars driving past. So I wanted to go further. And we needed to figure out a way to make that happen. So my exercise physiologist and I had a bit of a brainstorm, and we came up with an approach. And so I would walk 20 minutes. So I knew I could walk 30, okay, so I would just walk 20. I'd take a rest. Sometimes that could be half an hour, sometimes it was an hour. Probably every third time, I actually just slept on the side of the track for 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I just take as long as I need. Walk 20 minutes, take a break. Walk 20 minutes, take a break. And so it took me all day to walk the 2 to 3 hours to this point. But I made it. I was pretty tired. And so I stayed here 2 nights, which was part of the plan, so I could have a day of rest in between, and I walked out. And so we took a program, we took a goal, broke it down, found a different way of approaching it, and it worked. And it was amazing. It was cold, but it was so good. It was right here in Tongariro. It was just beautiful. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to pee and looking up and seeing the Milky Way, and it was just breathtaking. It was so good. And so this illustrates why power. And that's what I was, without knowing it, I didn't know anything about hope theory at this point, but without knowing it, I was tapping into way power, the ability to identify new pathways to navigate obstacles and achieve a goal. It was just a game changer. I achieved something which I previously thought was not an option. And you know, it took a lot of work and some creative thinking, but sitting there reading my book, hope began to seep back again, and it was amazing. It was thrilling. So fast forward another couple of years, and this is me in the shadow of Aurahi Mount Cook on the Bull Pass. So at this point, it's been hundreds and hundreds of hours in the gym. And this was my first proper mountaineering mission for years and years and years. And it was mind-blowing. So since my first overnighter, previous slide, a few years earlier, there have been lots of ups and downs. We'll be figuring out a new way. But here I started to get a sense of agency, which is the willpower. I don't love the word willpower. I prefer agency, so I'll probably use agency more, but I developed a sense of agency, or that sense that I can do this. So going into this trip, I had serious doubts and actually quite a lot of anxiety. Like Icarus, I kept on wondering, like, oh, am I flying too close to the sun and hoping to achieve this mission? You know, am I going to push myself beyond my limits and come crashing to the ground in a molten mess? You know, and but I tried to remember that whatever happened as an outcome of this, that we just needed to find another way. You know, we just have to approach it from a different direction. So we took it really slowly, walking for slightly more than 20-minute blocks this time, but still walk a little bit, rest a little bit, walk a little bit, rest a little bit. And so I still remember just a few moments before this where, so walked up from this direction, and then the Tasman Glacier here is behind me in the photo. And so as I was walking up, cresting the pass, and the Tasman, you know, is just like you begin to see it as you approach the pass, you begin to see it. And the view and the expanse of it, it was just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I couldn't believe the view. I mean, I love mountains. It was just like music to my heart, seeing the snow-capped mountains. But I think more profoundly, it was like, I can't believe that I've actually done this. Like, this is, I had almost convinced myself that this was not possible. And here we are. And so I think that moment of realizing that I can do this, I am able, I have agency, that was huge. And I've always experienced this with mountains, but I think this was particularly true at this point in time, that looking over the valleys and up the ridge lines and up the couloirs to the peaks, for me, when I look at the landscape, I get this incredible sense of possibility. That, you know, it's like, oh, you've got that ridge, oh, you imagine going up that valley, and there's like a lifetime of adventure in front of you. And standing here this time on the Bull Pass, I had this real sense of that possibility. Like, actually, this is possible. I just need to find a way. I need to find the right path. So I had a goal. I was finding pathways to achieve them, and I had agency. So willpower was coming to play, and I was realizing that I had the capacity to achieve my goals, and so hope was building. And then this is me just a couple of days after my 30th birthday, which becomes significant just in a few minutes. But I was on a week-long climbing camp up on Ruapehu with the New Zealand Alpine Club. And at this point, it's almost exactly 4 years since my MS diagnosis. And as I mentioned before, by this point, still hadn't really told anybody except for family, closest friends, and a few random people that I'd met at the MS Society. And I felt very isolated. I was, in the outdoors community particularly, I felt really apprehensive about sharing my diagnosis. I was afraid that I might be treated differently or stigmatized, or that people might not understand, that I might be judged. And I was worried that the disclosure of my diagnosis might limit my pathways and reduce my sense of agency. That stuff might become closed off to me as a result of the disclosure of my diagnosis. So it made it really difficult to participate in groups like this when you're hiding such an enormous thing that does actually impact your function. And so a couple of days into this trip, I disclosed my diagnosis to someone I just met for the first time. And Nina, I think, had left by the point that this photo was taken, so she's not here, but it was, going into it, it felt really scary, like going into the unknown. But to my surprise, I actually felt an enormous sense of relief, and was met by nothing but acceptance and encouragement. Like, sometimes that acceptance was, you know, somewhat helpful, or well-intentioned, but sometimes help was not called for, but it was still from a good place, and I really valued that. I really appreciated that. But most significantly, it enabled me to connect with a group of people in a new way. And I discovered the strength of we power, that social resources that sustain us as we strive for a goal. I was, particularly by the end of the camp, a week of chatting about this, so I felt more comfortable about being honest about my struggles and my symptoms. And together with a couple of these people who are my climbing partners, we were able to explore new pathways and routes, both literal and metaphorical. But with their support, I had a growing sense of agency. With their help, I had more capacity to pursue pathways. And I realized that community only made me stronger. So WePower is so important, and hope grew some more. And I think the thing that's amazing about WePower, about community, is the fact that in community we are able, in external resource, we are able to tap into our internal resources in ways that we can't by ourselves. And so we need community. But as I mentioned, this is just after my 30th birthday, and birthdays are always a time of reflection for me. And I got to my 30th birthday and I had a bit of a panic. I was like, I'm a professional student, living with my parents. I don't have a girlfriend. I have no assets apart from my climbing gear and a bit of a junky car. I remember my dad's 30th birthday, and he had a house and everything, and what am I doing with my life? I sort of had this crisis of meaning. I was like, oh my word. And and at this point in time, Mastering Mountains was a seed of an idea that I had been contemplating. And so I did something completely normal. I threw it all in. I decided to take a break from my PhD studies. I spent 2 months in India and Nepal attempting to climb 2 6,000-meter peaks, and which was to fulfill my lifelong goal of climbing Himalayas. But climbing can be, for some people, a little bit of a selfish sport. It takes a lot of time, and you experience the summit, and it's just you and maybe someone else, and not for everybody, obviously, but for some people. And I was afraid that it was going to become selfish for me. And so I wanted my climb to mean something more than just my sort of like, oh yeah, I climbed 6,000 feet. So I wanted it to mean something. And I decided to use the 2 climbs to raise money for Mastering Mountains, to set up the charitable trust, and so that I could help others with MS with their rehab costs. At this point, I had spent, I think, I figured it out ages ago, it was about 2,000 hours at the gym. And the cost of the gym, cost of the exercise physiologist, all of these things, it adds up and it's expensive. And I was only able to afford it because I was a professional student living with my parents at home. And I thought, man, other people, this isn't necessarily accessible to them. So I thought, well, I'm going to set up Mastering Mountains to help other people with their rehab costs so that they can achieve an outdoor adventure also. But also, I just really, really wanted to help contribute to the conversation around what's possible with a neurological diagnosis. I just wish that someone, as I said before, someone had said to me when I received the diagnosis that, like, hey, it is still possible to get outdoors. It is still possible to have a fulfilling life. It will look different than what it did before, but it still is possible. And so I was hoping to maybe show that for other newly diagnosed people that they can have hope. So for me, these larger goals of starting Mastering Mountains and inspiring others, they became my sense of why, my purpose. And so this was my why. This is why power now beginning to kick in. And so within why power, there is an interesting relationship between goals and meaning. We noted earlier that why power is the meaning that makes a goal valuable. Your why. And what's interesting is that hope is fueled by meaningful, long-term goals that align with our sense of self and with our values, and that transcend self-interest. So, like, I don't know, I'm completely making this up on the fly. If I don't particularly love gardening. I quite like the result, but I don't particularly love digging holes and all those kinds of things. So, you know, if my goal was to do something that's related to gardening, I probably, like, it's just actually not a meaningful goal for me, and I would be not very motivated to do it, and it would just fizzle. So there's this really important relationship between what we value, our sense of self and identity, and our ability to see a goal through. So why power is an expression of our values, and it gives incredible motivation when it's meaningful. And it helps us envision a brighter future and a more hopeful future for ourselves and others. So I went off, oblivious to hope theory and why power and all these things. I went off to Nepal, and it was, or India and Nepal, and it was completely amazing. And so this is me in India, and I was traveling over a 5,000 meter pass called Chengrala Pass, heading over to the border with China to do an acclimatization mission. And complete aside, you'll notice that everybody else's motorbike is bigger than mine. I hadn't ridden a motorbike in years, and the guy who hired it to me, he was like, "You should get a big one." I was like, "No, I haven't ridden one for ages, let's go for a small one." At 5,000 meters, I was like, I can understand why big ones are better. It was like, we just got up and over the pass. I was preparing to climb a 6,000 meter peak in India called Stock Kangri, and unfortunately for this first peak of my mission, I had to turn around just a couple of hundred meters from the summit. It's a very long story involving having to rescue my guide from the glacier, and then a stomach bug with things coming out both ends, and minus 20 degrees weather, and it was just not the day for it. So we turned around, and then I journeyed to Nepal. And so this is me on another minor 5,000 meter peak during a training mission. And standing here was really memorable. Above the clouds, next to Imje Tse, which is this incredibly aesthetic peak just off my shoulder there. And this was like a dream come true. I was pinching myself. You know, I couldn't believe it. I had read about these mountains, and here I was standing among them, and this was my dream. It was phenomenal. And a few days later, I achieved my goal of climbing Island Peak, or Imje Tse, just pretty close to Mount Everest. And so this summit is 6,100 meters, actually 1,000 feet. And the experience completely blew my mind. We got up there in really good time, just before, just as the sun was rising, and seeing the sun just strike all of these peaks, and it was perfectly still. It was just me and my guide Pasan on the summit, and it was just so incredibly beautiful. And you know, and Mount Everest was like right there. It felt like you could almost reach out and touch it, and the sense of accomplishment was immense. And I think what really struck me as well was the privilege of being in this place and being able to enjoy this view. Like, the Himalayas are just crazy. You look at these faces and you're like, how does this exist? It just looks unreal. And so the privilege of being there, but also the fact of, you know, all of this work that I'd put in, and all of these people that had inputted into me and helped me and supported me to reach this point, all of these things coming together at that summit, and just the sense of gratitude and the sense of achievement was just huge. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have this picture actually pinned on the wall above my desk. And for me, this image is a reminder of the power of hope. And that when you have a goal, which is that anchor, that cognitive anchor, and you add way power, the ability to see multiple paths, willpower, the sense of agency, we power, a strong community, why power, a sense of meaning or purpose. When all of these things come together around a goal, that you get a hope that is strong and that will carry you far. And the reason I have this pinned against above my wall as well is that sometimes I still get not sometimes, often I still get discouraged. I'm like, man, and things feel a bit hopeless. But actually, this reminds me that hey, with the right tools, you can do more than you think. And so, out of this trip in India and Nepal, I was able to raise $10,000 and launch Mastering Mountains, which was an incredible outcome. So I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, my goal with that climb was to start Mastering Mountains and help others, and to change the perception of what's possible with a neurological disease. And so coming out of Nepal, we had the money to start Mastering Mountains, and we advertised the grant through Everest New Zealand, and Sue Delarue in the middle there from the Waikato, she was the first grant recipient. And so when she applied for the grant, she could walk she has MS obviously, she could walk for about 10 or 15 minutes at a time, and never on uneven surfaces. And she has a young daughter, or not so young daughter now, who she really wanted to be able to enjoy the outdoors with. And so Mastering Mountains gave her the money to get a specialist trainer involved to help with her rehab and cover the gym cost. And so she applied herself for a year with the trainer, and at the end of that time, she and a community of others from MS Waikato, they did a 6-hour traverse of Manga Tutari near Cambridge, and it was incredible, to see that transformation and to do this walk up and over a mountain, which was really meaningful for her. I was just stoked to be able to help someone else and to see that first goal of mine to help others sort of coming to fruition. But coming back from Nepal, I was also given the opportunity by Massey University Press to write a book. And I thought this was an incredible opportunity to really spark a conversation around what is possible with a neurological disease. And so I jumped in it, and it was way harder than I thought. I think it was harder than climbing on Peak, if I'm honest. But so I came off this tabletop experience, and I was just plunged into the valley. And I think in writing this book, I actually processed my diagnosis for the very first time. And my earlier state of denial around the diagnosis had meant that I'd never properly processed the emotions that came with that diagnosis. And I experienced a lot of grief, and at times really felt like I would even drown in it. But the book was published, and it was a success, and so in many ways that was kind of like my second goal of helping to maybe inspire hope in others. That was kind of achieved also. But I say kind of, because at the same time, through all of this, I started going backwards physically. And I experienced significant regression in my symptoms and abilities during this time of writing the book. And I hadn't allowed my body time to recover properly after Nepal. I came back and then began writing the book about 6 weeks later. And so I hadn't allowed my body to recover, and as a result of writing the book, I set myself probably back a couple of years in terms of what I was physically able to do, and that was really discouraging. And unfortunately, I reverted to my old ways of being like, well, I'm just not trying hard enough, and I'm just not training hard enough. And so I pushed myself hard. I set ambitious goals, believing that I could just train the weakness away. And some of the goals I achieved, like this trip to Stewart Island. My mates and I, we flew into Stewart Island and then walked up into the ruggedy range where there's heaps and heaps of unclimbed granite. And so we put up, the three of us put up 10 first descents. And on this crumbly, unclimbed granite in Stewart Island, which was incredible and a real privilege. And Stewart Island was just staggeringly beautiful. But there were plenty of missions and goals that I set myself that didn't go so well. And I began to experience what is called hope fatigue. And hope fatigue comes when you start to set unrealistic goals. And it's a state of mental and physical exhaustion where an individual becomes tired of trying to maintain hope. Hope just felt too hard sometimes. And with that, there's often a loss of agency or willpower. Like, we start to see obstacles and we think, there's just, I don't have it in me to address this or overcome it. And there's a loss of perspective. Like, we encounter a challenge and we're like, this challenge is immovable. There's no way around it. So weight power becomes diminished, willpower becomes diminished, and the resulting state is, it's different from hopelessness. It's not all out despair, but because you still have a goal, but that goal, it feels like you'll never reach the goal, and so you're stuck in this in-between. You have a goal, a dream, but not the resources to meet it. So I felt stuck and exhausted. And my symptoms kept on getting worse. And I now, in retrospect, I now realize that I made a mistake that ended up putting me in this position. I had lost sight of my purpose and values. Achievement and climbing peaks had become my goal, and the thing that would give me meaning, not helping others or doing something that was beyond myself. So my goals became quite self-interested. I was just, in it for Instagram and Facebook and summit selfies and all those kinds of things. Achievement had become my greatest value. And going back to what we said earlier, that our goals are the cognitive anchors for our hope. And so when your goals become bad or aren't very good goals, whether if they're unrealistic or just actually unhelpful goals, unhealthy goals, then our hope gets set adrift. Without a good anchor, our hope gets set adrift. And so one day I was coming back from a run, and so we're now in 2019. I was coming back from a run, and I should not have been running. I was so tired, but I was just like, I am going to run, or nothing's going to stop me from this, And I was just determined, and I was pushing myself, and one day I came back from a run, and I was just feeling weird. I started to lose my balance as I was running and then walking. I got home, and quite quickly, within about the space of 30 minutes, I lost the ability to communicate beyond yes and no. I was struggling to understand any language. I had pretty much no balance. My wife, Bex, had to get me undressed and dressed to go to the doctor. I then, I couldn't read, so I couldn't interpret text. It was heaps of weird stuff, and I couldn't drive for a long time. But I felt completely worn down. I felt on the cusp of hopelessness again. And as a result of that flare-up, I went to see Debbie Mason here in Christchurch. And I had a couple of appointments with her, and then she told me that I had been misdiagnosed with MS in the first instance, and that I had functional neurological disorder, or FND. And I was like, what? And I'd never heard of FND prior to that point. Just out of interest, how many people have heard of functional neurological disorder? Oh, yeah, very few, yeah. Well, and this is typical. This is, not many people have heard of it. And for me, you know, you'd sort of think that receiving one life-altering diagnosis, you'd kind of like, I know how to deal with these. But it was devastating the second time, and that caught me off guard. And debilitating pain became a constant part of my life. I stopped exercising. I struggled to get outdoors at all. And I got to the point of being able to walk for about 12 to 15 minutes before I became completely maxed out, and then that would be it for the day. You know, I was wiped out. And I had to quit my job. And so this was, I was like, what the heck is going on? You know, and goals, a bit like, I was back to walking with crutches as well. So I couldn't balance without the crutches. And, you know, it felt like I was back, and the mobility scooter in many ways. Goals felt out of reach, but I still so badly wanted to be outdoors. I just felt like I had hope fatigue. I just couldn't see a way forward. I felt like my challenges were immovable. I felt like I just didn't have the strength or the ability or the capacity to pursue pathways, and if I did identify one, and I just felt spent. But I got admitted in 2020. I got admitted as a day patient to a Burwood Pain Clinic, and where I received treatment for 3.5 years. And it was the best medical care I've ever received. And with their help, I was able to rebuild strength and mobility. So I worked with a physio and a psychologist to get me going again. And when they said to me that I was working with a physio, I was like, yep, that makes sense. And working with a psychologist, I was like, and I've got issues, but they're not that bad. But actually, the psychologist was fantastic. It was probably for me the best part of that whole time at Burwood. So together, they helped me reconnect with my way power by being able to identify pathways forward. They helped me connect with willpower by helping me rebuild the physical and emotional capacity and sense of agency. We power by helping me to relearn how to ask for help. I'd stop asking for help. Why power by helping me rethink my purpose, meaning, and values. So hope began to seep back in. But let's pause for one moment and just briefly talk about values. So as I think back to my time at Burwood with the psychologist, I think one of the most helpful things that I have come away with was reconnecting with my values. So values are the fundamental attitudes that guide our mental processes and our behavior, and they give life meaning. So values are with us all the time, sitting in the background, reminding us of what matters and guiding our decision making. And so, so when life gets hard, values, when we rely on them, when we tap into them, values invite us to reframe the situations that we're facing, and with a simple question: how can I still live the kind of life I care about, even here, right now? And for me, that question regrounds my cognitive anchor, you know, that hope sits around. It secures my hope. So my psychologist, Simon, he helped me realize that, that when my sense of achievement had become tied to my values, I had meanings, I had why power, only as long as I accomplished my goal. And when I didn't achieve, which was increasingly more and more of the time, I felt like I didn't have any meaning, and then I'd lose hope. So my psychologist, Simon, he helped me see that I needed to redefine my values to begin rebuilding hope. And that's what I did. And so my values, so above the desk, I've got my values, picture of Island Peak, and a picture of me as a kid. To remind me of the joy of being outside. That's what that picture's there for. And my values remind me when I'm feeling discouraged, and I'm remembered of the joy of being outdoors, I'm remembered of what's possible with hope. My values are like the compass that tells me how to get there. So for me, as I was at Burwood, rebuilding my capacity, doing all of my exercises again, I began to focus on living out my values. And initially, you know, one of the things I had to do in Burwood was little walks around the block. And I'd be walking around the block, and it's not the mountains, this is so silly, you know, this is dumb, so boring, all these concrete places. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And my Simon reminded me, like, well, one of my primary values is adventure. So how do we turn walking around the block into an adventure? And, you know, so I'd try different routes, or I'd focus on trying to find different things around on my walks. It was kind of different each day. Or going on adventure was just strolling down underneath the cherry blossoms, which are a little bit hard to see here, with my wife Bex in Hagley Park. You know, and that was still a beautiful adventure if you connect it to your values. Another value of mine is curiosity and learning things new. And so I learned how to, I took painting lessons as a way of learning a new skill. For me, spirituality is a really important value. And so for me, that means enjoying moments of stillness and connecting something that's bigger than me in the outdoors. So it's not necessarily a dramatic mountaintop experience like Island Peak, but in moments of quiet and being present, even just on the deck out the back in my garden. Generosity is another value of mine, and for me that's expressed through Mastering Mountains. And so by focusing on my values, my goal became, how do I live out my values right in front of me, where I am. And when my values expressing my values became the goal, that hope had an anchor again, a good anchor. Before, my goals were to climb peaks for the summer selfies, but now those goals became centered around my values, whether that's a neighborhood walk or up a mountain peak. And this is a much better, more secure anchor. So last year, I set myself a bit of an ambitious goal. It was 10 years from my climbing Island Peak, and I wanted to raise some more money for Mastering Mountains again. And so I decided to attempt to climb 52 peaks in 52 weeks. And so each peak had to be named on the map, and it had to be taller than 1,000 meters. Those are kind of like the 52 peaks is a bit of a thing in those laws. And so this is obviously me and my friend Katie, who has MS. She's a climber and also actually a trustee of Mastering Mountains. And we're at the top of Mount Cheeseman and the Greybirds. And so for me, this was peak 33 of the year. Now, so my goal was for 52, and I only climbed 38. And while I was really grateful to have climbed 38 peaks, and it was just amazing to be able to get outdoors with mates, I came off, I had to abort almost as many climbs, so to retreat off almost as many climbs, unsuccessful. So I had almost as many unsuccessful peaks as I did successful ones. And while the decision to come off a peak early is disappointing, which was exactly what was happening here. I was with a mate down a Two Thumbs range next to Lake Tekapo, and we were ski touring to try and get some peaks. And this past year, I've been having a lot of problems with my legs and muscle engagement and stuff, and my legs were just not working properly, and they were so they got rigid, and I couldn't control my skis safely, and so we decided to just call it a day and turn around. And I felt really disappointed in that moment because I'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks. But while it's disappointing for just a moment or a few days, because my values aren't tied to accomplishment anymore, they sit there and they remind me of what's most important. It's not about climbing peaks. It's about adventuring with mates, about being curious and being present in nature. And for me, as I reflect now on my attempt to climb 52 peaks, I would have loved to climb 52 peaks, but I'm not disappointed because I had some great times out there with mates. I saw some beautiful scenes. We lived out one night out the back of, in the St. James Range out the back of Hammer Springs, and we saw the most ridiculous sunrise. It was mind-blowing. Like some amazing moments in nature with friends, and so all of this experience was a success, even if I didn't climb all 52 peaks. So I suppose that is my journey, and how now my hope functions in relation to goals. I think goals are so important. They're those cognitive anchors around which hope forms. And for me, I'm obviously a big fan of outdoor goals. I think everyone should have outdoor goals if you like the outdoors. Otherwise, don't. But regardless of what your goal is, there is so much power when we connect with that sense of way power, of finding a pathway forward, of adapting, trying to find a way around obstacles, of willpower, which is building the physical and emotional capacity to see a pathway and be like, yep, I'm going to choose that one, I'm going to go for it. We power, asking people for help, bringing other people along on the journey, drawing on their resources as well. And why power, connecting with your values to give what you're doing here. And that's how we build hope. So I suppose that's pretty much it for me now. But I suppose the one question which I give to you to ponder is what goals are meaningful to you that you can attach that anchor to? What can you center your hope on? And that can be anything like what's something meaningful that you can do that will motivate you to keep out of the walking frame? Or, thinking about what is the goal, what's a goal that has real meaning, that will sustain that effort and give you hope. So that's my journey, and welcome any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick. It's very inspirational, and I think when we met to discuss this talk, I think I came away just really thinking about mountains mountains as a metaphor, and that mountain is different for everybody, whatever that mountain may be. It's kind of navigating those challenges, but with purpose. And I think, yeah, that's a beautiful thing, a beautiful takeaway. So I'll pass the mic round to anybody who has a question.
Have you ever thought about going the other way, into a cave?
Oh,
Thank you.
great question. Very quick story.
I have.
Oh, good on you. Caves terrify me. If something goes wrong, to flick the PLB in the mountains, and a helicopter comes and rescues you, caves. I have thought about caves, but I went caving once, and then without a guide, and got lost temporarily. But that moment of, for probably about 30 minutes where we were lost, scared me out of my mind, so I haven't gone back since. So. Great question.
When did you get diagnosed with fibromyalgia?
Oh, great question. So I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I started at Burwood, so that was in 2020. Yeah. I'm not sure why I didn't get diagnosed with fibromyalgia with the FND diagnosis, but but anyway, so at Burwood.
Nick, thanks very much for a very inspiring talk. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
You were clearly a very goal-oriented person from an early age. I mean, at 7, describing, the pinnacles and the libraries and all the things to do with mountains that were really important. Do you think if you hadn't been goal-oriented like that, your journey might have been different?
Oh, that's such a good question. And so my wife is also a psychologist, and would probably tell you that, well, not probably, she would certainly tell you that I am probably too goal-oriented sometimes. But I think, that's a really great question. And I think the goal, I think that prior to Burwood, I probably was, well, not probably, I was definitely too focused on achievement and the goals, and that worked negatively. But I think since then, after all of that psychological help and work and the support of my wife, I've been able to, I think, rein it back a bit. And I sort of feel like maybe how I am now, slightly less goal-orientated than before. I feel like maybe if it was not for my goal orientation, I might have climbed a smaller peak, or just gone to Everest Base Camp or something like that instead of trying to climb 2 6,000 meter peaks. I feel like it would have been a bit more tame. But I think that perhaps, regardless of the goals, like being in the mountains in the bush, it just is like, it's so good. So I think that would remain true. Yeah, but great question.
Because of your physicality being so exceptional, has that meant that you need less medication?
Good question. So because at the time of the MS diagnosis, I was diagnosed with primary progressive, and so there was no medication. And but I am I don't know how many people are familiar with pregabalin, which is a painkiller. I am taking I take massive dose of pregabalin each day. So I try and keep it reasonably. I try and keep things reasonably. I have had quite negative reactions to some medications, like baclofen, for example, nails me. I'm just like miserable. And so I do try and be careful with what I'm taking, but yes, I can't function without it at the same time. Yeah.
I was just going to ask another question about the sort of the physical and the cognitive and the links between the two.
Yeah.
I think when you were describing all the effort that you put into the physical things, and then you decided to write the book, and the book requires a lot of cognitive effort. I mean, your brain is involved in the physical, your brain is involved in the cognitive.
Yeah.
You suddenly use your batteries up on the cognitive. the physical. And the reason I ask this is I think there was I remember reading about a South African guy who had Parkinson's, and he was very, very handicapped by it. His wife was, I think, involved in something called Walk for Life. And he devised on mindful walking, I think it was. And the thing they talked about, he used to walk with a guy who was a professor. And when they started talking about real cognitive stuff, all his symptoms, which had vanished while he was doing the physical stuff, all came back, and his balance went and everything because his brain. I just wondered if there was a connection there.
You're absolutely right, and I didn't recognize it at the time. Like, I knew that our emotional states and our mental states and our cognitive load, I knew that had some bearing on my physical symptoms, but I had no idea the level of that. And I think probably the diagnosis of FND. Actually, one thing which I forgot to say was, I should probably explain what FND is for everybody who doesn't know what it is. So FND is similar to MS in many ways, in the sense that there is a breakdown between the brain and the body. For MS, that's because of demyelination. For functional neurological disorder, it's for some reason that they are yet to determine. Nobody knows why. But the signals between the brain and the body can either sort of be really weak, or they can be way overactive. And so FND, it is the treatment for FND is often with a physio and a psychologist because and to answer your question, what we do, what we think, and what's happening in our cognition for FND has a really pronounced effect on our symptoms. And so, and it's the same with fibromyalgia as well. Fibromyalgia uses similar mechanisms to FND. Some people think that they're probably sister conditions, and one other thing to that. But yes, I had completely underestimated that connection, and now I have to be really careful with managing those two loads. Like today, I've done 2,000 steps, not very many, but it's a high cognitive load, and tomorrow I'll probably be quite tired as a result. And so I do have to think about, like, tomorrow I would not plan something that was very physical because I just went out. So yeah, I hadn't previously accounted for those things, and I think that's why I went downhill so rapidly with the book. I had 3 months to write the book, so I was just like this 7 days a week or 6.5 days a week, and yeah. So you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Long answer, sorry.
Fibromyalgia is not neurological disease, though, is it? It's autoimmune?
Fibromyalgia it's not autoimmune. There are other similar pain conditions that are autoimmune, but fibromyalgia is neurological. So it's where the brain is unable to sort of, or it misinterprets the signals it's receiving as we all the time. We get the feeling of our clothes against our skin, all of these sensations that our brains are processing all the time, which we normally filter out. But for fibromyalgia, that filter is broken, and so the brain receives all of these signals, and it gets confused, and it's like, I don't have this right now. But quite often, the movement of my clothes will feel like my skin's burning. And so my skin's honestly not burning, but it just kind of like gets its wires crossed and the filter's broken in. And so that's what fibromyalgia is. No worries.
Great talk, Nick. Thank you.
No worries.
Just maybe a couple more sentences on Mastering Mountains. Where is Mastering Mountains at in 2026? How big are you guys?
Yeah.
Is the grants you're doing, is this, how many people are you supporting? Is it an annual thing?
Great question. And actually, I don't know why I didn't include a slide of that, so thank you. So Mastering Mountains is still functioning. We're still pretty small. It's mostly just me, but it's now, where before it was something I did on the side, it's now my main thing. And so we generally help about 3 people a year with the full thing. our emphasis these days is at the very beginning, we funded rehab costs. We sort of gave people the money, like, have fun, send us some pictures at the end, and we'll see you later. And it worked well enough, but not in all cases. And what we quite quickly realized is that actually it's not just to have enough to have rehab. People need social support, they need tools to manage their well-being and all of these other things. So they need mentoring. And so Mastering Mountains, we started looking at how we can mentor the people we work with. So we fund rehabilitation still primarily with neurophysios these days. And we provide mentoring, which is, I think, from my perspective, the core of our work. And then we help provide community with sessions a bit like this, but online, because we work with people around the country. And so it's still going, and we help about 3 people each year. And we have for the sort of fully funded thing, we have, I always get my dates wrong. It is applications. We accept applications from beginning of April to the end of May. And so you can apply, and you tell us about your goal, what you're hoping to achieve. And what we're looking for is a meaningful goal. And so a goal that's going to connect you to people, it's going to connect you to, you'll be able to do stuff with your family or something like that. So a meaningful goal that's in the outdoors. And it can be a small goal. Like at the moment, we're working with 2 people whose goal is just to do a short walk in about an hour long in the Banks Peninsula. And then there can be big goals, like Katie, a few slides back, she was actually a, whoops, I don't know how to go back. This is my first time using the iPad. And so Katie was actually the 2020 grant recipient. And so her goal was to climb the minarets near Mount Cook, which is a 3,000 meter peak. It's a serious mountaineering challenge. When she came to us, she could walk for about an hour at a time. And then after about 18 months, she was able to climb the minaret. So it can be a small challenge, it can be a big challenge, it can be walking, biking. I've had one person do a swimming, they had a swimming goal, an ocean swimming goal. So it just has to be outdoors, it has to be meaningful. And then, and then provide those resources. But you can also join in other ways as well. We run seminars that are available to the public, so feel free to jump online. Yeah, totally.